Hello, and thanks for stopping by. The number of streets spread throughout London is truly mind-boggling. According to the London A to Z, there are around 69,000 to be found amongst the capital's 32 boroughs. These streets, or roads, lanes, passages, or whatever other designation they may go by, come in all manner of shapes and sizes. Some twist and turn along ancient paths. Several pass through eerie-looking tunnels. Lots are long, plenty are cobbled, and there are many whose very name offers a tantalising window into the past. In this video, we're going to be exploring one of the most curious categories of London's roads, those streets which are incredibly short, so short in fact that you can traverse them within a matter of seconds, often leaving you wondering why they were ever named at all. Although that's not to say that these tiny patches don't have their own intriguing stories to tell. Before we set off, I should give a quick disclaimer. We'll be exploring these little streets in descending order, and although I'll be providing their lengths in both metric and imperial, please do bear in mind that these measurements are approximate. I'm sure in each case, there will be an inch or two here and there to haggle over. Also, this list is by no means definitive, so if you can think of any other very short streets in London, then please do be sure to note them down in the comments. Anyway, on that note, let's begin. Coming in at 58.2 metres, or 190.9 feet in length, Wembley High Street is considerably longer than some of the places we'll be seeing later. Although that aside, it's still a real oddity, for it's certainly the shortest road in London to be labelled as a high street. Looking at it today though, Wembley High Street, well, it doesn't exactly come across as a traditional high street, does it? As you can see, it's purely residential. There are no shops or businesses here. If you want those, you have to head down to High Road Wembley. It wasn't always like this for Wembley High Street though. This quiet lane can trace its origins back to when Wembley was a tiny village, the earliest mention of which appears in the year 1247. And in centuries past, the high streets did have more of a community focus, with both a blacksmith's workshop and a pub called the Greyhound being located here. The high street's fortunes changed with the arrival of the railways, and the world famous stadium too of course, which resulted in a rapid growth for the area, and a shift in focus which centred Wembley a little further towards the south and east. Thankfully, the historic importance of Wembley High Street has been recognised, and it's now classed as a conservation area. Buried amongst the maze of one-way roads in Fitzrovia and connecting Ridinghouse Street to Foley Street is Candover Street, which at 39.7 metres, or 130.2 feet long, is easily one of the West End's shortest roads of note. This path has been in existence for at least 200 years. You can see it on this map from 1822, and for many years it was called York Street. It had become known as Candover Street by the late 1880s, Candover being a valley in Hampshire, which is home to a small group of villages, but I've not been able to ascertain why this name was opted for. If you have any ideas, please do let me know in the comments. Despite its compact size, there's some impressive architecture squeezed onto Candover Street, namely Belmont House on the western side, and Tower House and York House on the east. The latter were constructed by T.J. Balting & Sons, a firm which, as noted on these stylish mosaics, specialised in gas and electrical engineering, but who decided to branch out into property development at the turn of the 20th century. Unveiled in 1903, these grand apartments were the result. The architect behind them was Herbert Fuller Clark, the same fellow who designed the famous Blackfriar Pub, which I covered in my last video. I'll link that below in case you missed it. Savoy Court, which provides access to both the Savoy Hotel and the Savoy Theatre, is easily the plushest address on this list. It's roughly 38 metres, or 124.6 feet long, making it the shortest road in London to feature a roundabout. Savoy Court is also noteworthy in that the usual rule of the road doesn't apply here. Rather than driving on the left, as you're supposed to in Britain, motorists, mostly cabbies, chauffeurs and delivery drivers, are required to drive on the right. There are several reasons for this quirk. When Savoy Court was laid out in 1903, as a result of Strand being widened, its compact nature meant it was simply easier to enter from the right. It was also common etiquette at the time for cab passengers to sit behind the driver, and although cabs were still mostly horse-drawn back then, drivers sat towards the right-hand side, just as drivers in Britain do today. Having cabs approach the hotel on the right, therefore, meant it was more convenient for passengers, as it enabled them to pass between the cab rank and the Savoy's main lobby, without having to walk around the vehicle. As you can see, the little roundabout on Savoy Court is a pretty cramped spot. To navigate it in one go, i.e. without having to nudge back and forth, a tight turning circle of 25 feet or 7.6 metres is required, and it's said that this directly influenced the design of London's famous black cabs, because to this very day, each licensed London taxi must be manufactured with the ability to make a 25-foot turn. As someone who used to work as a London cabbie, I can safely say that this turning circle is pretty nifty and comes in handy all over town, not just at Savoy Court. The topiary cats you can see here on Savoy Court, by the way, represent Caspar, the Savoy Hotel's famous resident cat statue, which was sculpted in the 1920s, its purpose being to sit in as a 14th guest whenever a private party numbering unlucky 13 came here to dine. Savoy Court also makes an appearance in the climax of the 1980 gangster film, The Long Good Friday. It's from here that Harold Shand, played by Bob Hoskins, is snatched by two IRA hitmen, one of whom is played by a very young Pierce Brosnan. Bridging the small gap between Bank Junction, Queen Victoria Street and the road known as Poultry, Mansion House Street is one of London's most prominent little streets. Indeed, during the 19th century, many Victorians considered it to be the shortest street in the entire metropolis. Mansion House Street is home to, well, the Mansion House, which is the official residence of the Lord Mayor of London. The street is approximately 36.2 metres or 118.7 feet long, and if you exit Bank Tube Station on the corner of Prentice Street, you pretty much step right out onto it. As well as the Mansion House itself, Mansion House Street is also notable for once being home to the early 19th century prison reformer Elizabeth Fry, who used to appear on the £5 note. Elizabeth is commemorated with a plaque at the western end of Mansion House Street, on the junction with St Mildred's Court. Just a few moments away from Mansion House Street, and coming in at 26.7 metres or 87.5 feet, is Sise Lane. Sise Lane is very old indeed. You can see it on Ralph Agas's 16th century map of London, which shows us the road used to be much longer, and was known in those days as St Sives Lane. Sise is a corruption of St Osiph, sometimes spelt Osgyth, a noblewoman who established a convent in Essex during the late 7th century. There are two legends related to St Osiph. One claims that she returned to life 3 days after being drowned, whilst the second states she was beheaded by a group of Vikings, after which she somehow managed to pick up her own head and walk to a nearby church before collapsing. Either way, I guess she was pretty unlucky. A church called St Benet's Sherhog, which was dedicated to St Osiph, was established here in the year 1111, although sadly it was destroyed in the Great Fire of London and never rebuilt. In centuries past, Sise Lane was considered a fashionable address. John Viscount Wells, the half-uncle of Henry VII, died here in 1499, and the street was also home to Nicholas Ferrer, a key figure in the Virginia Company of London, who were responsible for establishing the colony of Jamestown in early America. As such, Sir Walter Raleigh was a regular visitor here, as were a number of the Pilgrim Fathers, who met with Nicholas before setting sail aboard the Mayflower in 1620. Although now pedestrianised, Clennam Street, which stretches for 25.7 metres, or 84.3 feet, in Borough, is considered by many to be London's truest short street, in that it's connected to two other roads and contains a number of active premises. It's certainly the shortest street in London to have a pub, the Lord Clyde, and a very lovely pub it is too, a real gem. The current building dates from 1922, but there's been a tavern here since the 1820s. Back then, the pub was called the Duke of Kent, and the street upon which it stood was much longer. That incarnation, known as Peter Street, ran between Red Cross Way and what's now Great Guildford Street. In the 1890s, Peter Street was divided up, with part of it being renamed Dorrit Street, and this tiny section Clennam Street. Both of these names are in reference to characters featured in Charles Dickens's Little Dorrit, Daniel Doyce and Arthur Clennam. There are other streets around here too which were blessed with Dickensian names, including Copperfield Street, after David Copperfield, Quilp Street, after Daniel Quilp, and Weller Street, after Sam Weller, plus another very short one which we'll be seeing in a short while. Running for a mere 20.7 metres, or 68.2 feet, Barnett Street, which lies deep within Whitechapel, is pretty nondescript, and little mention appears to have been made of it over the years. I have come across one report though from 1879, detailing an incident in which a woman named Ellen Rafford, described in the report as a she-savage, attacked another woman named Louisa Watts here, by cracking her around the head with a brick. Nasty. Fortunately, Louisa was okay, although she did appear in court with a bandaged head, and for the brutal assault, her attacker was sentenced to 2 months hard labour. There are several other tiny streets around the East End, which are interesting in that their names refer to the area's maritime heritage, and consequent links with other parts of the world. This, for example, is Poonah Street, which is 53 metres, or 173.8 feet long, and named after the city of Poonah in India. Olive Street, meanwhile, is a little cobbled patch on the Isle of Dogs, close to the Thames, measuring 28.9 metres, or 94.81 feet. Its name is of Scandinavian origin, and in the 19th century, it was home to a large manure works. I'm sure the smell was most bracing. And this is Dunn Street, near Watney Market, which comes in at 27.5 metres, or 90.2 feet. It's named after John Dunge, a 17th century sea captain who's buried in Stepney. We'll return now to Borough, where, close to Clennam Street, which we explored earlier, there lies another wee road named after one of Charles Dickens's characters. Dorrit Street. Dorrit Street is a mere 19 metres, or 62.3 feet long, although it was once part of a longer road called Duke Street. It was clearly once a place of great poverty, for in 1898 it was reported that a resident here, a 38-year-old widow named Elizabeth Ballantyne, died of starvation. On a lighter note, there's another interesting road located just around the corner from Dorrit Street, Disney Street, which I've covered in another video some time ago. If you'd like to know more, then I'll link that below. Sited off of Seymour Place, just minutes away from Marylebone Station, Walmer Street is approximately 18.9 metres, or 62 foot long, although it could be argued that it's slightly longer if you take the private yard which backs onto the Western Eye Hospital into account. It's hard to believe looking at it now, but until the 1950s, Walmer Street was home to one of Marylebone's oldest communities, a snapshot of which is given with this news clipping from May 1935, which describes a street party held for 70 local children. Walmer Street was emptied out in the late 1950s, thanks to a slum clearance, although when interviewed, a number of the residents said they were unhappy with the move. Some complained they were being pushed away from their places of work, whilst one woman named Mrs. Clayton stated, "Many of the houses are really well looked after. It's a shame to pull them down. After 49 years here, I hate to think of leaving all the friends I've made." Back then, Walmer Street stretched around the corner. That path is now covered by a primary school, although the adjoining Walmer Place still exists, which, to be honest, isn't exactly salubrious. A person of note associated with this area was the social reformer Emma Cons, who's commemorated on the corner of Walmer Street with a blue plaque. Emma lived and worked here, and amongst her many achievements, one of the most notable was the establishment of the Old Vic Theatre near Waterloo Station, the main purpose of which was to provide working class audiences with cheap tickets for opera performances and Shakespeare plays. Measuring 13.5 metres, or 44.2 feet, Kirk Street in Bloomsbury is little more than a courtyard. As with several other streets we've seen though, it did used to be longer, and it was originally known as Robert Street. The reason it changed its name to Kirk, which is an old Scottish name for a church, appears to have been lost. There did used to be a Scottish Presbyterian church not too far from here on Regent Square, but whether or not there's any connection, I cannot say. And so, we finally come now to London's shortest street of all, Leigh Hunt Street, which in recent years has become a tricky place to pin down. The image seen here was taken by Google Street View in 2012, and going by this record, I'd say Leigh Hunt Street is roughly 12 metres or 39.7 feet long. It's very difficult to tell today though, because the road has since been pedestrianised and absorbed into Mint Street Park. As for the title, well, Leigh Hunt Street was named after the poet and critic James Henry Leigh Hunt, who in 1813 committed the grave error of describing the Prince Regent, the future King George IV, who by all accounts was a truly obnoxious man, as both corpulent and a fat Adonis of 50. These words were published in a newspaper called The Examiner, and for daring to insult the Prince Regent, Leigh Hunt was sentenced to 2 years imprisonment. He served his time in the Surrey County Jail, or the Horsemonger Lane Jail as it was also known, which was located very close to here. Leigh Hunt appears to have made the best of his time whilst incarcerated though. He later wrote about how he, quote, "papered the walls with a trellis of roses. I had the ceiling coloured with clouds and sky. The barred windows were screened with Venetian blinds. Perhaps there was not a handsomer room on that side of the water." Leigh Hunt is also commemorated by Leigh Hunt Drive in Southgate, his place of birth, and the tiny Leigh Hunt Street in Southwark is just moments away from the collection of streets we've already encountered, which are renamed in honour of Dickensian characters. In fact, there's a Dickens connection to be found with Leigh Hunt Street too. The two writers were friends, and in later life, Charles Dickens admitted that he'd based the character of Harold Skimpole, who appears in Bleak House, on James Henry Leigh Hunt. Prior to being named after Leigh Hunt, this street was much longer and went by the name of Lombard Street. During that period, it was bordered on either side by two imposing institutions, the Evelina Children's Hospital and the St Saviour's Union Workhouse. This patch of land was also used as a plague burial pit, evidence of which was unearthed in the 1930s, when a gang of workmen digging on Leigh Hunt Street uncovered around 100 bones and assorted skulls. Considering such history, I think it's terrible that Leigh Hunt Street is now at risk of being erased altogether. It's still listed on some maps, although it doesn't appear in the latest edition of the London A to Z, and since pedestrianisation was carried out in around 2015, the street sign identifying this unique spot has been removed altogether, which in my opinion is criminal. So let's do our best then to keep the memory of Leigh Hunt Street alive, and make sure that London's littlest road isn't forgotten. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this exploration of London's shortest streets, and as always, I'd love to hear your own thoughts. Can you think of any other similar short streets? either in London or your own hometown? If so, please do be sure to let me know in the comments. If you haven't yet subscribed to Rob's London, then I'd appreciate it very much if you could please consider doing so, as this, along with clicking the bell icon to receive notifications, would ensure that you don't miss out whenever I publish a new video. Plus, of course, it'd be wonderful to have you along. If you're feeling extra generous, you can also support my work with a tip via either my Ko-fi account, which I'll link below, or the YouTube thanks button, which appears as a heart icon beneath the video. Any such financial donations are of course greatly appreciated, and they really do help go towards creating content. Anyway, on that note, thanks again for watching friends, stay well and please be sure to stay tuned.